The featured company is a paid client of Proactive Group Holdings, and this recording is disseminated by Proactive on its behalf.
Put simply, three intrusion-related gold systems sitting within about 15 square kilometers. La Llanada is an entire gold field of flat, high-grade or sub-horizontal high-grade gold mineralized veins over about 250 square kilometers that we have under title.
All right, welcome back inside our Proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Dr. Tim Coughlin. He is the CEO of Royal Road Minerals. And Tim, it's great to see you again. How are you?
Good to see you again, Stephen. I'm great. Thanks very much. We've got summer started here in Jersey, so can't be better.
Good. Well, there's lots of stuff to talk about. Why don't we sort of talk on the political stage? And I know there's some elections happening on Sunday, which is obviously in Colombia. Very important to obviously what you're doing there as far as your mining and all that kind of fun stuff is concerned. So no matter what happens, how is that going to affect Royal Road?
Look, we maintain our course. So, we've always tried to remain apolitical but cooperative. The vast majority of our non-technical engagement is focused on community, and there's nothing more important than that in our sector. And almost all of your listeners, I think nowadays, will be aware of that. And then I think there are, in respect of this election, because it's so polarized, it's become so polarized, extreme right, arguably, versus extreme left, arguably. There are two key points, I think. The first one is that, Colombia has a very strong Congress, which is pretty much split down the middle. So whoever wins, either side has got that to deal with. Secondly, and I think something that's really important that perhaps hasn't been so obvious to many is that over the last 14 months or so, we've had a very cooperative and very proactive government in Colombia, so mining agency particularly, which we've enjoyed, and it's helped us advance the projects to where they are right now. So I think it's important. It's important for me not to go on much longer about the election, but also not to reduce Colombia to sort of simplistic political assumptions. In practice, the institutional process is quite different to what happens at our scale, at community level, on the project, on the ground.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for sure. So we'll see how that sort of shakes out as the weeks go on. I want to talk a bit about the company and your portfolio. I know that you've assembled a significant portfolio. There's lots going on within the company. So give us an idea about where you see potentially the strongest discovery potential.
Well, that's where we're drilling right now at GAM. So not in terms of unknown potential, but in terms of known potential. Okay, so we know what we're drilling there. We're drilling a porphyry cluster. We've been drilling one of them only at this point in time. So this year we're hoping to expand that drilling program across all three. There are three porphyries there. And we see, well, obviously we wouldn't be drilling it if we didn't see, world-class potential. We're not looking for smaller deposits. So that's the first. And then in terms of, let me phrase this properly. So I guess unknown promise. Then very clearly that there are two projects that stand up above the rest. And just to remind you, we've got 1,840 plus square kilometers of combined license applications and titles in Colombia. So it's a big land package. But there are two properties, and a curated land package, I should add. But there are two properties that really stand out. One's called El Molino in Cauca, and the other one is called La Llanada in Nariño. El Molino is, put simply, three intrusion-related gold systems sitting within about 15 square kilometers. La Llanada is an entire gold field of flat, high-grade or sub-horizontal high-grade gold mineralized veins over about 250 square kilometers that we have under title. So, they are seriously impressive projects. They're blighted at the moment by social unrest and logistic issues, and they require some political will in terms of moving them forward.
Yeah. Current priorities. Tell me a bit about, is it the drilling that's the current priority, and is that what's driving the focus right now in the company?
Yeah, so we've just finished a small round, to like a refresher round, like an aperitif at Gwinter, to get our feet back on the ground and stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. We completed that. We're still waiting for some results from a neighboring project called Margaritas, which is another undrilled porphyry until now. And then, yeah, really the rest of the year is going to be drilling that out. We need to really get to some sort of a resource stage by the end of the year, re-rate the company, and that's the primary focus. And of course, we're hoping in the background that we'll be provided access and the support and access we need to acquire to access some of those other properties. Yeah.
You had some recent success as far as permitting is concerned, which is a positive. So do you feel that Colombia is evolving into an area that will allow this to continue? Because permitting can always be a challenge, no matter where you are in the world. So in order to get that across the line was good. Do you feel that that's going to continue down the road?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. Oddly enough, as we stare down the prospect of this upcoming election, is that if we imagine for a minute that wasn't happening and there was another couple of years of runway, then I think, we could all sit here, all of us being operators in Colombia, and say that actually the last 14 months have been very, very positive. And it feels like there's been a significant kind of bulk shift in country towards supporting the extractives, responsibly done, of course. Look, we got a little permit, but probably more importantly, just recently, a couple of weeks ago now, Sarah Armstrong Montoya, who is a director on our board, is also the CEO of Córdoba Minerals, and they just received their mining permit, so the environmental permit for an open pit copper mine up in Córdoba. That was significant. I didn't see it really hit the news waves or hit across the wire anyway. But that's a significant bit of progress and an objective move forward for the Colombian government.
Obviously, your portfolio is all over Colombia. You've covered the country, and so. But do you sort of break it into spaces? And is it Southern Colombia that really is a big focus of the company moving forward? Is for exploration? Is that sort of what you're looking at as the strategy in moving forward?
Yeah. So what we do is we break it into what's called the Northern Block and the Southern Block. And interestingly enough, there's sort of geological, morphotectonic, and sociological, socio-political definitions that help us delineate those two different blocks. And so the Southern Block is very complicated from a social perspective. And again, what that needs is political will. The two projects that I alluded to previously, that we see as fairly high priority and exciting, are both down there and won't advance unless there is some political will. And our intention is to gently sort of push on that after the outcome, when we know who we're talking to, basically. So after the outcome of this upcoming election, the Northern Block, it's still Colombia. It's not the easiest place to operate from a security perspective. But I'll tell you what, and this is the thing that I suppose frustrates me most in Colombia, and I know I'm not the only one. That the energy, the intelligence, the motivation, and the pure hospitality of rural Colombia is an incredibly untapped resource, and untapped because there's this sort of grey overhanging cloud of security issues. But we see more of that coming to the surface in northern Colombia. Incredible, what we call our northern blocks, so Antioquia and Caldas. Incredible potential and a really great place to work. So Colombia's got a few hurdles to get over, but boy, when it does, it's going to be quite a place.
Tim, I've talked to you a long time. It seems like your enthusiasm is still there. You feel very confident about where the company's at and where it's heading.
Yeah, I think we came back to Colombia, so we suspended things in Colombia at the end of 2022 for a couple of reasons. One, there was a basic reason. There was a key permit that we were trying to that we're trying to get, and at that point they were all suspended and remained so until March of last year. And then also, perhaps more mechanically and fundamentally, we had a big overhang from March of 2023 through to September of last year, which was our largest shareholder at that point in time owning 18% of the company wanting to sell. And so that's been tough. 2.5 years. We've been through that sort of thing before, and we generally sort it out within a month. So this was a bit of a shock. So it's really pleased to have that behind us. Rio 2, many of your listeners will know, are now our largest shareholder. So they own about 15% of it. They own 15% of the company. And it was a really refreshing and invigorating restart in September of last year. So energy's back.
Good. Exciting news for sure. Tim, thanks so much. Really great to catch up with you and see where everything's at. And we look forward to continuing to follow the story. Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good to see you. There's Tim Coughlin, the CEO of Royal Road Minerals.
The featured company is a paid client of Proactive Group Holdings, and this recording is disseminated by Proactive on its behalf. It is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, an offer, or a solicitation to buy or sell any securities. Viewers should conduct their own research and consult a qualified financial advisor before making investment decisions. The views expressed are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect those of Proactive Group Holdings, trading as Proactive Investors, or its affiliates. No responsibility is accepted for any loss arising from reliance on the information presented.